All right, call the meeting to order. You join us in the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If it's all right, I'm going to take the agenda out of order and start with Anne Marie Banfield. Welcome. If you'd like to pull up a chair,
Okay. I also
be great.
invited Representative Cordelli to join me. Since he
you want
has
to pull up a chair, Representative Cordelli? If you'd like.
He's pretty well versed on this topic and has some legislation coming, and I thought if I get to something and it applies to some of his legislation, it might be something that would be helpful as I go through this. Kind of wrote everything out because I wanted to make sure I didn't leave anything out. And I tend to sometimes leave meetings and think, oh, I should have said this, I should have said that. But let me introduce myself. My name is Anne Marie Banfield. I am a volunteer as the education liaison for Cornerstone Action.
Excuse me,
Yes.
could you speak up so the
Sure.
people in the audience can
Hear better?
That's only for video, that's
Oh.
not for voice.
Okay. I began researching education years ago for my own personal reasons, and I wanted to guide my children through a school with the best quality education available. I connected with experts from around the country whose main focus was academic excellence, how to make children smarter. I knew that with an academic foundation, my children would have the best opportunities available to them. It would be up to them to determine where they would go in life. According to President Obama, and if you look at the U.S. Department of Education's website, they are currently redesigning public education in America. This will shift focus from public education as an academic foundation to one that is focused on workforce development. I would suggest taking your time to look closer into what this means for the Wakefield District and what has already been implemented in your school to meet this radical shift in public education. I was invited today to discuss Common Core standards. I will just add that national standards are part of the redesigning of public education and competency-based education or outcome-based education. That's another part. There are many parts to redesigning of public education, but today I'm going to focus on national standards or Common Core standards. We need to go back to No Child Left Behind, since that is the law that was used as an excuse by the Secretary of Education to push states to adopt national standards. Unfortunately, many of the state standards were considered low quality. New Hampshire was no exception. Recently, Commissioner Berry admitted at a public meeting that the New Hampshire math standards were graded at a D- by the Fordham Foundation. Fordham is an organization that has received money from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and has been promoting Common Core standards. This is accurate information. The New Hampshire math standards developed during the Lynch administration were some of the worst in the nation. It was painfully obvious that prior to the adoption of Common Core, this information was never shared at any public meetings that I attended. If the low-level standards were the catalyst for adopting Common Core, why was this problem never addressed by the New Hampshire Department of Education? Why weren't they working to develop the highest quality standards for New Hampshire schools to follow? When the Board of Education conducted public meetings to elicit feedback from the public simply was not aware of this new initiative. Some parents are just now discovering that it is in their schools. Legislators didn't know about it, school board members didn't realize what was going on, and no information was brought before local school boards. The few who spoke in favor of Common Core standards seemed to share the same message. They liked the Common Core standards compared to the D- New Hampshire standards. At that time, it didn't appear as if anyone the New Hampshire board members included were looking at standards that were superior to the Common Core standards. Instead, the focus was on comparing the New Hampshire standards to the Common Core standards. That was one of the biggest mistakes I've seen when it comes to the adoption of Common Core standards in New Hampshire. No one looking at what a set of superior standards look like. I'm going to present documentation from the only 2 content experts that sat on the English and Math Validation Committee for Common Core. Their expert analysis of the standards will help you identify the flaws in both the English and Math Common Core standards. Both Professor Stotsky and Milgram refused to sign off on the Common Core standards because they were well aware of the higher quality standards that have been developed in a few states and that were not internationally benchmarked. If the goal is to help our kids compete internationally or even qualify for a selective college, these standards will not accomplish that. I would encourage you to look over their critiques, contact them directly for any further analysis. They are always happy to discuss this important matter to help board members understand the problems with the Common Core standards and even help a district find ways to improve upon what you are using in the district, both in terms of standards and materials. I'm just going to list some of the problems that I think are pretty glaring. Again, there are pages worth of from them directly that go through grade by grade and their entire analysis of their critiques. But some of the math problems, for instance, there's no STEM preparation, and STEM meaning science, technology, engineering, and math. The math standards stop at Algebra 2 with a few trigonometry concepts. So that means that if children want to go beyond and apply for a STEM program at a selective college, there's no standards that you can follow. California, one of the states with the highest math standards, went all the way through calculus, just to give you a comparison. The Common Core math standards prepare students for Algebra 1 by the 9th grade. That's 3 years behind their international peers. Algebra 2 standards do not complete an Algebra 2 course, so there's missing standards. The totality of the core standards discussion of ratios, rates, and percents is filled with errors and misunderstandings. The Common Core standards employs an approach to teaching geometry that has not been widely used anywhere in the world, and the only known experience is considered a failure. The English language arts standards are not rigorous. They were designed to allow mid-level grade 11 students to enroll in credit-bearing courses in a non-selective college. Again, speaking to the language arts, they are not internationally benchmarked and will not make any of our students competitive. This is from Professor Stotsky. There is no research to support Common Core stress on writing instead of reading. There is no research to support Common Core stress on informational reading instead of literary study in English class. There is no research to support the value of cold reading of historical documents, a bizarre pedagogy promoted by the chief architect of Common Core's ELA standards. Available research suggests exactly the opposite of what Common Core's document and standards promote in the ELA classroom. While these standards may look good next to D- standards, what parents are concerned about is that they do not go far enough. Standards should be clear, understandable, and lay out what should be learned in each grade level to put them on par with their international peers. Some will describe Common Core standards as rigorous. However, I would caution you to look deeper into the meaning of what they mean by rigorous. These are not just a set of standards. They come with exemplars, for example, and math practices. They essentially guide teachers on how to teach. For instance, in testimony from Dr. Terrence Moore from Hillsdale College before the Indiana Senate, he talked about how the Common Core standards include learning about the U.S. Constitution. He then goes to point to the Common Core appendix that refers to materials painting the U.S. Constitution in a negative light. His testimony addresses his concern that young children will be first introduced to one of our founding documents in a negative way. The suggested reading list has been criticized for literature that includes pornography. Then we look at what is coming from the textbooks and publishers and companies that are providing Common Core aligned textbooks and materials. Parents and board members are told that the math will now be harder or more rigorous. Ask, what does that mean? One would assume that more rigor would translate into expecting students to know more math facts or math concepts. In other words, moving ahead in order to keep up pace with what you might find in Singapore. Unfortunately, that is not the case. Rigor found in many of the Common Core math programs consists of confusing math questions, or in a statement by a New York principal, trick questions. Superintendents have been warned to expect proficiency levels to drop once the new national tests are given in their district. As a board member, it's important to question why. Is it because we are expecting children to know more math? Or is it because young children cannot answer confusing questions? I'm going to submit to you just one example of a math sheet that was sent to me by a parent. It's called Double Digits Plus One, and I'm going to send this around. But I basically what it does is it's a math page where children are asked to add one-digit problems. And I sent this out because, as I stated, I consult with experts around the country, mathematicians in some of our top universities. So I sent this around, and I asked the mathematicians to look this over. And one gentleman who helped develop the best standards in the country in California responded this: as usual with Common Core, the problem is slightly more subtle. The practice is not completely stupid for mental math, but it is made completely over-important in the first grade, or in any grade really. In the first grade, they should be learning how to add and subtract with 20, and by now, middle of the year, they should be working of the beginning of the standard, addition of 1- and 2-digit numbers, carrying and borrowing. Instead, they follow the Common Core idiocy of practicing and developing strategies, properties, and mental math based on them. And when one might attack such idiocy with, they will innocently respond, don't you want your child to be fluent in mental math? Wasn't that what you always asked us to do? The answer is no. We did not. Instead of memorizing once and forever, just a handful of sums up to 20, they now waste your time on memorizing many of the tricks and shortcuts in the name of mental fluency and multiple methods. Small wonder kids end up confused. I'm just going to pass this around. You can certainly look at it and read the rest of it on the back if you like. But it just kind of gives you an example. I actually got this from a friend of mine. And if you can't figure it out, welcome to the club, because there's a lot of parents who couldn't figure it out. And her first grader just gave up and just didn't even do it. So yes, she had to answer the questions, but then look at what's asked for her to do in addition to answering those questions. I've tutored students in the past in math, and there is nothing good about confusing children when it comes to learning math. There is nothing good about trick questions or asking them to struggle. This leads children directly to private tutors, where they will oftentimes describe themselves as dumb or stupid because they cannot figure out confusing questions that are oftentimes age inappropriate. It's a perfect way to kill the love of learning math. It's important to fully vet the math curriculum, textbooks, as they align to Common Core. It is also important to fully vet the national assessment coming, the Smarter Balanced. Ask your teachers to go online and look at the sample questions. Look at the sample questions yourself and see if you think they are age appropriate. A reporter from the Union Leader recently took the English sample assessment and wrote about the questions and asked, the questions that were being asked, that they were political in nature. I brought his article too. Let's see, look at that. I would suggest a thorough analysis of this new assessment and look at possible alternatives, because other schools are. Alternatives could involve using a test that has longevity, like the Iowa Basic Skills Test, the Stanford Achievement Test, or the California Achievement Test. I know that Iowa Basic Skills Test has a pre-Common Core test still available and offers the community and parents honest feedback on academic proficiency without the political influence, the confusing math questions, or as a tool to data mine information on the student and their family. That brings me to my final point that has created controversy surrounding the redesigning of public education, and that is the data mining. One of the biggest concerns I'm hearing from parents is the lack of privacy protections in place now that the FERPA law was rewritten by the Obama administration. Parental consent is no longer required for information to leave the district. Yes, children are assigned a unique pupil identifier number. However, even that offers no real privacy protections. With the U.S. Department of Education now suggesting 400 data points be collected on students and their families, IT techies will tell you they need about 3 data points to identify that student. This information gathered can also be shared with vendors. Recently, a student sued the ACT for selling personal information without her consent. Without those privacy protections in place, this information can be sent without a parent or student ever knowing. As a district, it is important to look at your current policies and update them to include parental consent if any non-academic information on a student leaves the district. Some school districts are moving ahead to address the concerns that have been brought to them by parents. Manchester and Alton, New Hampshire have committed to developing their own academic standards. Both Professor Stotsky and Professor Milgram would be a good resource for any district looking to develop better quality standards that are internationally benchmarked and have proven to be successfully implemented. I would caution, though, standards alone will not get the job done. It is critical that the materials and the textbooks focus on academic knowledge that require students to learn and master rich, quality academic curriculum. This has to be offered to students in an atmosphere that utilizes pedagogy that has been shown to improve academic achievement. I'm seeing a push in pedagogy with Common Core standards that studies have shown actually reduces academic achievement. Examples are inquiry-based learning, project-based learning, teachers as facilitators instead of instructors. I'm going to give you everything that I've read, and at the end, there are, in blue, websites that you can go and you can read studies on those pedagogical approaches in the school. Quality standards used in a classroom that require a teacher to use methods that lower academic achievement defeats the purpose. I can go on and on about Common Core standards and the redesigning of public education and the failed methods being employed in the classrooms, but I simply do not have time to go over years and years of research. As a mother, I'm deeply disappointed that you have to reach out to me in order to get a critical view on Common Core. This is one of those times when I would expect the Department of Education to present all information in this reform effort. I would expect them to share with you the critical analysis from Drs. Milgram and Stotsky so you can decide as a board if you should follow the Common Core standards or work to develop higher quality standards for your district. I've attended several meetings with the commissioner and the department employees who seem to be selling Common Core rather than giving you detailed information on what is good, what is bad, and what you can do as a district to offer the best quality education for your students. I am encouraged, though, that you've reached out to me to listen to critical analysis of Common Core. I would just encourage you to continue researching all of the reform efforts so you can make the best decision for the students. I am happy to answer any questions if you have them. I'm available anytime if you want to contact me later. I do have an email list with parents and school board members from across New Hampshire and out of the state, if you're interested in joining that. I would just end by expressing my gratitude for your service to the community, because I know the commitment that it takes for you to do this. I am going to give everything that I read to you. It does have the contact information for Dr. Stotsky and Milgram. They did sit on the validation committee for Common Core, and both of them refused to sign off on the standards. They are the only 2 content experts that sat on that validation committee. And they have also been instrumental in developing some of the highest standards in the country in Massachusetts and California. So these individuals had the credentials, they have the expert analysis, and I contacted them directly and asked them what information I can share with you that would be most beneficial. I'm going to give that to you also, that you can, it would take hours to go through it right now, but I'm going to leave that with you also. But I'd be happy to answer any questions, and Glenn is also going to be here, so I don't know if you want to explain some of the things that he's working on as far as legislation that might, offer some assistance on this.
Thank you. My name is Glenn Cordelli, and I'm just finished up my first year in the House. I represent Tufton Borough, Moulton Borough, and Sandwich, and I sit on the House Education Committee, and it's been an education for me. I was not aware of Common Core until I became a House member and started hearing about it on the House Education Committee, and sat through some presentations by the Department of Education. Over the course of the last year, I've done a lot of research on my own and with the help of friends, and have become quite disturbed at what I've found about Common Core and what's going on. And really, there's been a firestorm growing across the country, parents and educators alike, about Common Core and everything that's going on, the new assessments. No place more so than in New York State, where they've already given the first set of assessments based on the Common Core standards. And test scores went down by at least 30%. And parents and educators alike are in an uproar, partially because part of their teacher salaries are tied to the assessment scores, as they are in New Hampshire, but to a lesser extent. So there is this firestorm brewing, and we've seen it in several communities here in Alton and Manchester, as Anne Marie mentioned, and I think concern in other school boards also. I brought with me, this was a letter written by the president of the School Boards Association for New Hampshire to the chair of the State Board of Education, expressing concerns. Let me just read a couple of sentences. Talking about the policy-related changes that are going on, school boards continue to grapple with the yet-to-be-defined changes apparently required by the ESEA waiver, the implementation of the Common Core standards, and a transition to the smarter balanced assessment tools, to name but several prominent new and/or federal mandates. On behalf of its members, NHSBA has posed various questions to the department officials concerning these new initiatives, seeking clarity as to the impact on local school districts, and with the hope that the answers would enable our understanding and support for the initiatives. Those questions have largely been unanswered to date. I asked the commissioner about this, and she said, that's old news. Of course, I read it to her about 2 weeks after the memo was sent. She said, that's old news. Those questions have been answered. That's one person who's creating a negative element. But he's also president of the School Boards Association. I'll leave that with you in case you have not seen that.
Thank you.
One of the, as Anne Marie was talking about, is the Common Core standards, the new assessments, and also concerns about data mining. One of the most disturbing things to me was a recent statement by Bill Gates, whose Gates Foundation has funded a lot of this and has been throwing money to national PTA, national organizations who might or might not support the Common Core standards. He said a few weeks ago, and it's pretty much a quote, we're not going to know about this new educational stuff and how it works for at least a decade. But in that decade, your children, hopefully someday grandchildren, will be having to deal with what's going on. And what does that mean for them and for our country? As I mentioned, I serve on the House Education Committee, and we're going to be dealing with a great many bills this year. Almost 700 bills have been submitted for the House to be considering this year. And there are a number, there's about a dozen that relate directly to the Common Core standards. There's one bill that's an actual repeal of Common Core standards, which were adopted by the school board, the Board of Education for the state in 2010. There's a bill of which I'm a co-sponsor to push back, delay for 2 years, the smarter balanced assessments, to give everybody a time to adjust to what's going on and to take a deeper look at what's going on. I am sponsoring 3 bills related to Common Core. I'll just mention 2 briefly. The first does not impact Common Core directly, but any new educational standards. New Hampshire has what's called the College and Career Readiness Standards, which cover everything from math to science and social studies. Common Core are 2 slots in that umbrella of standards, math and English language arts, as Anne Marie was discussing. With any new standards that are being proposed, I think that there has to be greater openness and transparency. The commissioner herself said there wasn't enough discussion about Common Core standards when they were adopted. So what I've said in my bill is that, 1, there has to be a fiscal analysis of, let's say, of the standards that have already been adopted, math and English language arts. There has to be fiscal analysis because the department has said that they are frustrated about getting information about costs from the local school districts. On one hand, they're being told that it's not costing the school districts anything to implement Common Core or get ready for these new assessments. But at the same time, we have a legislator from Conway who's introduced a bill saying that the technology required for these new assessments is an unfunded state mandate and should be paid for by the state. So there's quite a dichotomy. So I said in this bill, we need to have a fiscal analysis of what's going on. And then for any new standards, there has to be, 1, the fiscal analysis done. There has to be a thorough evaluation of those standards compared to existing state standards and nationally recognized high standards. And that evaluation has to be made available to every school board in the state so that they have an idea of what's coming and how they want to deal with it. And thirdly, there have to be public hearings on those new standards in each of the 5 executive council districts. The other bill that I've introduced will impact the data mining aspect. There's really been a perfect storm over the past couple of years about student privacy and dangers for student and teacher privacy. From, as Anne Marie mentioned, the loosening of the FERPA laws in 2011, which provide those student protections. New common educational data standard formats, which provide for a great number of data elements that are very troubling. I'm not saying that New Hampshire is implementing all those or capturing all that information, but it's there in the standards and we have to take precautions. Things like family income, religious affiliations, student birth information, place of birth, social security numbers. And that applies to teachers as well. Teacher social security numbers, compensation information is all being requested to be put into these statewide databases. So my legislation would prohibit some of that legislation being collected, such as student body mass index, family income, as I mentioned. Those things would not be allowed in the state education database. There would be greater restrictions on who has access to that information, because now with the loosening of the FERPA laws, it does not require parent consent to send that information to researchers, volunteers, anyone who might be doing work on behalf of the school district. So I say, if it's being sent to a nonprofit, fine, if you have parental consent and you have agreements with that company that provide the safeguards that are recommended by the U.S. Department of Education. And to a profit-making corporation, No. Even with parental consent, you cannot send either the student information or teacher identifiable information to a profit-making corporation. There are more safeguards built in for things that are going on in classrooms around the country that I think might be of concern to parents and students and teachers. I come up from a family of teachers, so I'm very concerned about privacy rights for teachers. My daughter's a special ed teacher in Texas, and with the Gates Foundation grant, they're installing robotic cameras in each classroom. And those robotic classroom cameras will be used for teacher evaluation purposes. Teacher has no choice in this. And the students in that class, the parents, don't have any choice about this. What happens with those videos of the students and the teachers? They don't know. So my bill provides some safeguards in relation to that, basically requiring school board approval and consent, which I think throughout tried to incorporate parental consent into a lot of this, because I think that's extremely important. But that's just a brief synopsis of what's going on in Concord, and I can leave my card with you, and any further information I'd be glad to provide to you. And thank you very much for your time.
I just wanted to follow up that this is proposed legislation, so this is
Yes.
not the law. There's no guarantee that this will be passed into law. And so by coming here, I want to make that very clear that there are things that you can do at the school level that we're seeing other school districts do, which is reject Common Core and say, let's look at better quality standards. Professor Stotsky and Milgram offered their assistance to Manchester if they so choose it, to look at what they're coming up with, look at what they're developing, making sure that they're clear, concise. Math standards, for instance, they build upon each other. There's a logical order, and if you get that out of order, that can be a real problem, especially when you're talking about the cognitive abilities of a child. I'm a math tutor, and if you ask a young child to do something abstract, a lot of children can't do that. And that's what we're seeing in a lot of these textbooks, and these new textbooks coming out on Common Core, the example that I gave you. Little children just cannot think in those terms. Some can. So that would be one option, is looking at your standards. Mayor Gass has asked a great question to Commissioner Berry at a public meeting. What happens in 2 years when the waiver expires? This is something that can change up, and this is very frustrating for teachers. Teachers are going to look at new standards, they're going to try to teach to those standards, and then 2 years, 3 years from now, are they going to change? What if we get a governor who says, you know what, we want to elevate our standards. We realize that maybe the Common Core wasn't that good. So I think that has almost pushed and catapulted some of the other districts to say, maybe we should look at developing our own quality standards and using them in the district so teachers know in 2 years something's not going to be changed up on them. So that's from the standards perspective. I have serious concerns about this new national test. In this documentation, there is a critique on the Smarter Balanced from Professor Stephen Wilson out of Johns Hopkins University. I'm hoping I put that in here because I printed it off earlier. Yes, okay. And he talks about how the math assessment is assessing communication skills rather than math computation skills. And you can kind of see that in the example. So if a student does know their math computation skills, are they going to be marked off? Are your teachers going to be evaluated? Is your school going to be evaluated because your children don't know math? Or is it because they couldn't circle the square of what is a double digit plus 1? So those are the concerns. James Milgram also did another analysis and talks about the flaws in these tests. They're in the pilot stage right now. They're not fully developed. The Smarter Balanced itself is a subjective test. In our own laws, it says that it has to be objective. So using a Smarter Balanced assessment in your school is violating New Hampshire law. There's more on that in the information that I'm going to leave with you. So there's an issue with the assessment themselves, which is why I think we're going to see, well, Manchester's asking for a waiver. Glenn's asking for a moratorium. There's something that you can do as a district and ask for a waiver from this assessment. Number one, this should be vetted by you and your teachers to make sure that it's authentic. An assessment is very different than a test. A test is that's why I call it the Iowa Basic Skills Test, the Stanford Achievement Test. They test academic knowledge. An assessment is very different. They're looking for, do you have the right attitudes, value. The Smarter Balance is assessing dispositions of your children. You should know what that means. You should ask those kind of questions. There was a bill that came before, SB 48 came before, and it was passed in law, and the House Education Committee took the word dispositions out because they were so bothered by it, that our students can't be assessed on dispositions. Well, they took it out, but this is a national assessment. It's in there. So they're going to be assessing. That is a genuine concern. I think that as parents, I know as a mother, I want my kids tested on 2 + 2 = 4, not whether they have the right political answers to some of these questions that are on this assessment. So a waiver might be an option. Asking or looking to use an actual test that has, that parents can be comfortable with, that you can be comfortable with as a board. I think it makes logical sense. So those are the two things that, you can look at doing. The privacy issue, again, Representative Cordelli is addressing that, but what can you do as a board as far as a policy? Those are things that can be discussed. I would be happy to help out in any way or put you in touch with individuals who are national experts around the country if there's something that you're looking at. If you're looking at developing standards, that kind of thing. But other than that, that's really what I wanted to present, and if you have any questions, we'd be happy to dialogue with you.
I would just leave one takeaway from my perspective is that all of this is about high quality. I think you've heard from what Anne Maria said, that she wants highest quality standards possible. Secretary Duncan of the U.S. Department of Education last week, in talking about this backlash, said that it was largely white suburban mothers who had discovered recently that their children were not brilliant. And there's a backlash about that statement. But I think that if you look at any of this and talk to anyone who has concerns about Common Core, the assessments, you'll find it's all these people want better. They want better, just as you do. You want the best for the children of Wakefield. So I'd encourage you to take a look at the Wakefield wants better standards rather than Common Core standards. So I think that this is about what's best for the students, and hopefully we'll all reach that point.
I have a couple of questions. It was my understanding that it went up to Algebra 1, not Algebra 2. Is that?
No, it goes through Algebra 2. However, the critique is that it doesn't fully cover an Algebra 2 course. And a matter of fact, if you look at Professor Milgram's writings or things that he's wrote, he actually had to push for additional standards in Algebra 2. They were even going to be worse than what we got. So yes, it does go through an Algebra 2 course, but not to the degree that the mathematicians would have liked it to be.
And could you speak to dispositions?
That's a good question, because we had they had this discussion on the House Education Committee, because they couldn't even figure out what did they mean by dispositions. What are you assessing? And they were so bothered by it that they took the word out, because it was in there that this would be assessed. It was
knowledge, skills, and dispositions. And if you looked at some of the literature at the U.S. Department of Education, it equated dispositions to things like values and beliefs and attitudes, which were very troubling to us. And it was unanimous decision by the House Education Committee to modify the language. And they got agreement from the New Hampshire Department of Education to remove that language. And I think they substituted something like, basic, work skills, for homework, et cetera, things like that. It's removed in terms of the statute, but whether it's removed in things that you're going to see nationally or regionally, like the assessments and other things coming down the road, we'll have to be on the watch to see.
And would you speak to sustainability through education?
Can you be more specific?
Well, climate change, green economy. That's what I get out of the sustainability through education.
Are you asking, will you see politically charged kind of curriculum and questions?
That's the way I'm seeing it.
I've seen a lot of that coming from, I think if you read the article from the union leader I think I just sent it around, I think there were questions that had to do with an environment that are being asked on the Smarter Balanced Assessment. And he refers to them, I think, as politically charged questions. So, the way that the questions are being asked would certainly fall into that category. I would also say that I have seen a large amount of politically charged curriculum coming out of the textbooks, coming out of examples, worksheets. But I would also say, quite honestly, I saw that before Common Core. It's unfortunately something that I've seen prior. It's not getting any better. It may be getting worse. But absolutely, yes, you're going. I think if you look at the new science standards, which have not been officially adopted in New Hampshire yet, that's what you better look at. You better look at it very closely, because that's one of the biggest criticisms that I'm hearing about the science standards. But then you can also look at what we're currently using right now in New Hampshire. I think the New Hampshire science standards are rated at an F or a D. Same with the history standards. And if you want a comparison, I would say go to Massachusetts and set them side by side. The new national social studies standards, for instance, again, they have not been officially adopted in New Hampshire yet, but they refer to our system of government as a constitutional democracy. So they didn't even get that right. That's in the new social studies standards. So, as you go forward, I would suggest, and I suggest this to school board members all the time, open up the textbooks, look at the questions, look at, in my own situation, my son was in 4th grade and he was using a social studies book, and he was in a Catholic school. And at the time, I went to the back of the chapter and I started looking at the questions, and they were very analysis-based. And he's in 4th grade. And I'm thinking to myself, isn't this a time where he should really be learning the facts about what happened with the Mayans and the Aztecs? He's 4th grade. How can he make an analysis of historical things that had happened in history? And I started asking him factual questions, and he was answering them like this. And I said, how do you know this? He said, because my teacher made up a fact sheet. His teacher went above and beyond what was in that textbooks. And I sent her a thank you note the next day, because I knew how important factual information about history is important, and the textbook left that out. So my advice to you is to go through the materials, and I think the math professors that I talked to and Professor Stotsky would encourage you to do that. If you want a comparison, look at Voyages in Grammar, an excellent tool. Saxon Math. Look at what homeschoolers are using. Singapore Math, the real Singapore Math. There's a lot of there's math programs out there that call themselves Singapore Math. They're watered down. The California Primary Edition Singapore Math. You want to look at that. I'm a math tutor, so I tend to kind of gear myself towards that. And Professor Milgram has gone through textbooks and can tell you this is a good one. We have a lot of fuzzy math in New Hampshire right now because we were following the D- level standards. And so a lot of the schools aligned to fuzzy math standards. So I would not suggest going and using the old New Hampshire standards. And I don't think that the Common Core standards go far enough. I would say look at the California standards, look at the Massachusetts standards. Unfortunately, that's not what happened when the Board of Education adopted the Common Core standards a couple years ago. Everything was being, compared to the old standards, the New Hampshire standards. And if this is all you're going to compare to, you don't have the perspective to look at what real good quality standards look like. I don't know if that answers your question. I think I kind of got off a little bit on that.
I think, Mr. Chairman, you were pointing out some things that have been described in the next generation science standards that
Yeah.
Anne Marie was referring to. That's why I think that any new standards adoptions really have to be looked at closely. That's why I want an evaluation given to every school district, and that's why I want more public hearings, because it's vital that we know, what's coming down the road. And when I was on the school board, this was 15 years ago in Connecticut, a little bit different district. We had 5,500 students, and it was we had a $75 million budget. That was 15 years ago, but there was a curriculum, new curriculum that we were looking at as board members. Early 20th century United States was the course, and the movie that they were going to show to depict life at that point was The Godfather. I said no. Especially, Cordelli, no, that's not happening. So, it's, this kind of thing isn't new, but we always have to be on the watch, and even more so now with these new standards.
I think what would help, and what other school districts do, sometimes when they're pushed, but I think it's just a good idea is to just put everything up on the website. What books are you requiring the kids to read? What textbooks are you using? It is very difficult to find a district that has their textbooks listed on their website. And I always, when we moved a lot, I've moved a lot. So before I moved anywhere, the first question I always ask is, are you using everyday math? Because if you are, my kids will not be going to your school. That's how bad it is. So that was, I would go to a website and look to see if they had their textbooks listed. And unfortunately, I never found a school district that would have their textbook. Those are the things that should be listed so parents can see this information, be as transparent as possible. But I think as a school board, you have to go in, you really have to look through it and listen to your gut, because I get parents all the time sending me examples like that and saying, is something wrong with this? Yes, something's wrong with this. Your first grader cannot figure out what double digit plus 1 is. I sent that to parents. Most parents couldn't figure it out. How is a first grader going to figure it out?
Now, they say these are state standards. But through my research, I found that a non-governmental organization, the National Governors Center for Best Practices, actually helped come up with these standards, and they've actually copyrighted Common Core standards. So why is everyone saying these are state standards?
Right. That's been a point of contention for a lot of people. You're right, they're trade organizations, the NGO, the National Governors Association, and the Chief Council of State School Officers, which were the two organizations that employed Achieve Inc., actually, to write the standards. And if you go through this, go through Professor Stotsky's critique, she actually talks about the process that she went through when she was sitting on the committee to validate Common Core. Here's somebody, the nationally renowned expert in the country, her and Professor Milgram. And by the way, I've been talking to them for years. So when they were chosen to sit on this committee, I was thrilled because I had direct access to them. I thought, number one, they chose people with integrity that would give us the honest to God's truth on what they see. They had credentials. Professor Stotsky had to help develop some of the best standards she was charged with it in Massachusetts under Governor Weld. So these, and their students went from middle of the road to the best in the country. So they had a track record. Professor Milgram has helped develop the best standards. A lot of the people that developed these standards, the developers, never did it before. They had no expertise in this. And so, back to the organizations, if you read her critique, she goes through about who these people are and what their credentials are and why, she had a problem with some of that. And then just trying to get, she was trying to get information from them. She had to sign a confidentiality agreement. There's things that she cannot speak about publicly, cannot share with me, cannot share with anybody. This is supposed to be a public thing. I mean, this is, in a public institution, when she was developing them in Massachusetts, it was all transparent. The information was put out there for the public. There was none of this secrecy, confidentiality agreements, that kind of thing. So yes, that is certainly a point of contention. There was coercion. I went to a committee of conference meeting with some of the senators and some of the state reps in our state, on SB 48 that now categorizes your school as a priority and focus school, and I'm not sure if you have any in this district. But they walked in, Senator Stiles walked into that room and announced, if we pass 2 bills, we get our No Child Left Behind waiver. That's federal coercion. The federal government's telling us to pass 2 bills, and then they'll give us a waiver from No Child Left Behind. This is supposed to be state-led, because when Common Core came out, I don't think anybody in the state had ever heard of it before. So yeah, that's a point of contention and I would have to agree with that.
Right, because what's in the interest of a non-governmental organization coming up with standards for public education? Money.
Money.
It's
Yes.
just,
There's a lot of money to be made in this entire reform effort, absolutely. And that's another point that I've been hearing. New textbooks, you have to buy new textbooks, new technology. Everybody has to have these computers, because when you take these tests, everybody has to be online at the same time. And yes, you do have a few years, you can use your pencil and paper for a while, but eventually there's a whole lot of money to be made in computers when kids have to take these tests.
The president of one company, when these standards were really put out there in final form, company was called EduSense. They're a research organization. Said this is a godsend for us. So really, a lot of this is the convergence of education with big business.
well,
Were these 2 folks, Stosky and Milgram, on Channel 9 on Sunday morning?
No, you're talking about Joe Mendola and Siobhan Takis. They're business owners in Manchester, and they were countering the Business Industry Association coming out in support of Common Core. I reached out to the Business Association, or BIA, I'm going to say it called BIA. They came out in support of Common Core. They issued a press release, and I immediately contacted them because I wanted to make sure that they had heard some critique analysis, expert critiques from the content experts. I wanted to make sure that they heard this. So I immediately called and left a message for them, and they never called me back. So I don't know if they looked at all of the information. I tried to reach out to them, but never got a call back from them. So those 2 individuals were on that show because they have also looked at this and looked at the good and the bad, and have decided that no, not everybody in the business industry does support this.
Isn't there something being planned with Milgram and Stotsky?
Yes, Cornerstone, we are in the process, I was hoping to come here with a date, but we are in the process of setting up a webinar. And so that means that you can sit in your home, nice and comfy, cozy, and log on, and we are going to do a webinar with them. We're looking at the 5th or the 12th. We're waiting to hear back from them. And then that way, they're going to explain, I mean, you can read it certainly, but they're going to explain a lot more, and hopefully we'll get some questions and answers going. But once I have that date available, I'm going to try to advertise it as much as possible, and you can log in and listen to them directly. You can they can talk about when, how when they sat on the validation committee, how they asked for, give me countries where these are internationally benchmarked, because Common Core at the time was advertising these are internationally benchmarked standards. Now, when children are 3 years behind getting to Algebra 1, how do you call that internationally benchmarked? So they were saying, where are those countries? and they could not get any answers. They could not get information on which countries these are. They would still tell you they are not internationally benchmarked. Both of them would, and there's a reason for that. So while they were on the committee, these are the kinds of things that they were going through. So they're going to talk about that. They're going to talk about exactly the problems with the standards that they're seeing. I listed some of them, but I think they can go into more detail, because I can bring you this information, but I want people to hear directly from them. They were the only content experts. Yes, there were math people on this validation committee, but they were not mathematicians. That's a big difference. Big difference between a math educator and a mathematician, or somebody who has an education degree. There's a big difference between me. I've tutored in math, but I am not a mathematician. Okay, so there's a big difference. So we will set up the webinar. I certainly will let you know. We're going to do another one in January with, I believe, Joy Pullman from the Heartland Institute. He's going to go more into depth on the privacy issue, because this is something that's really concerning a lot of people.
I guess, excuse me, I guess that's when the sustainability through education was kind of driving, those are international benchmarks.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they are. And I just, I don't know. No problem with that. Anybody else? All set? Everybody? Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you for the invitation.
Appreciate your time and your information. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
Oh, and, well, actually, does anybody in the public have any questions for any of the speakers?
For you guys. Good luck with that.
Ed?
Anne Marie,
Oh, yeah.
my question is, how many states have backed out already, and why specifically?
Well, 45 states signed on, and there's legislation in several states right now to back out. Indiana, for instance, 19 states looking to back out. Okay, so Indiana, for instance, signed on, and Indiana had some of the best quality standards out there. And so the parents are in an uproar in Indiana, so they're looking also to back out. They had Professor Milgram at their Senate hearing, and he said you need to go back to your old standards. They were superior. Keep in mind, at the time that this happened, the economy had bottomed out, and states were in desperate need of money. And that's where the Race to the Top grants came in, and that's where the stimulus package came in. And in order to get that money, their belief was, we sign on to Common Core. Because if you did certain things, you were going to get the Race to the Top money. So yes, there are states that are looking right now to withdraw and go back. Some states have withdrawn from the test. Georgia said no to the test, because the test is really the driver. The test is what's really going to impact your teachers and impact your school. And I wish I could say it was a good test of knowledge, because I think you need to know if your kids are learning the academic content. You indeed need to know that, and there's nothing wrong with a good quality test. But I think as states are looking at looking at these assessments, they're now starting to say, wait a second, we have a real problem. There's a lot of people in New York, teachers and administrators, who were so supportive of Common Core, so supportive, and when they started testing, that's when everything blew up. Because as the principal said, when you have CPAs who can't figure out the math questions that their kids are being asked, that's a real problem. And that's what they were seeing.
Douglas?
Yeah, I have a question for you. Do you think our country needs a standard nationally? Because I read a book called by Amanda Ripley called The Smartest Kid in the World, Kids in the World and How They Got There. And I read about Finland and South Korea, how they're doing their educational things, and they have national standards. And when our kids go from one state to the next, we're not even. Some of our kids are behind, or maybe some of our kids are ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you believe we need a national standard?
Well, first of all, if we follow the Common Core and the states elevate their standards, our kids are going to be behind. So that's something to know. Manchester and Alton, if they elevate their standards, your kids will be behind if you're following Common Core. Okay, so that's a given. There's another book. It's called The Schools We Need and Why We Don't Have Them by E.D. Hirsch. And he talks about back in the 50s, when kids in our country were performing the best in the world. And at that time, what schools did is they aligned their curriculum and they aligned everything to what you would see on a college acceptance, to get into college. So that meant when your children graduated high school, they were literate. It was literacy, that was the focus. Remember I said in the beginning, we're shifting to a workforce development system versus an academic public education system. That's where we're shifting. So back then, there were no standards. But what schools did is they made sure that when your kids graduated high school, they were literate because they needed to get into college. If they wanted to go, kids who decided not to go to college went into the workforce, but they were literate. And so that's why we were #1 in the country. So do we need national standards? I think that it helps to have some level of what you expect students to know at each grade level, but then you also have to take into account special ed students. You know, this one-size-fits-all thing does concern me. I think that, you know, when you have high-stakes testing attached to it, you have teachers who, you know, in Manchester, for instance, you know, they're going to tie a teacher's evaluation to 20% of the student achievement. They're using everyday math. And so my question to them was, you're getting ready to spend $650,000 to improve your schools because they're priority and focus schools. And you still have everyday math in here, and you're going to evaluate a teacher on a seriously flawed math program. Wouldn't that money be better spent in getting rid of that math, bringing in real math, getting rid of the calculators in the classroom? Because that's a huge problem amongst the mathematicians. And by the way, a lot of mathematicians, you go into college, do not allow for calculators in the class. Guess who does better, according to the guys that I talk to? The homeschooled students who were never allowed to use a calculator and use real math textbooks. So national standards, do we need them? There are countries that perform better with national standards than us, and there are countries that perform worse than us that have national standards. That's a debatable subject. I think we should have the highest standards if we're going to use.
But I think you're referring to Finland, because I think they take the calculators and electronic equipment out of their classrooms.
I have seen the census data for, I think it's K through 8, and the number of students who actually move from state to state is 1.7%. So are we doing this all for 1.7% of the children? And we know that it's not going to be uniform across the board anyway.
But if a child from our state goes to another state college, they're going to run into the same problem?
Possibly, but that's been going, that's, you know, very often you'll find that students going from one place to the other have been able to be enhanced by that move, have picked up new information, and have learned some things they were behind and some things they were ahead on, some subjects areas. So it's not uniform across the board, even for those students who do move, I don't believe.
Go ahead, sir.
I think it's very important, and to reiterate, the distinction between assessment testing and achievement testing. Would you hit on that topic once again so we all have a better understanding of the difference?
Yeah, I didn't put it in the stack. I actually sent it to the reporter that when he took that assessment and found the questions to be politically charged. There's something, and if you Google it, it's called test versus assessment. And I think it's from Eagle Forum, and there's a whole explanation on the difference between a test and assessment. And I would encourage you to go read that because a test will test academic knowledge. An assessment is more about your attitudes, values, and beliefs, as we're saying. I mean, as you can see in that. And then the assessment, and keep in mind, prior to the Smarter Balance coming out, we used the NAEP, the National Assessment, and the kids would get through the academic portion. At the bottom, there's a questionnaire. So they've been asking personal information and data on children for years through the National Assessment. The difference was we had the privacy protections with the FERPA laws. And when the FERPA laws were rewritten and took away those protections for parents, that's what's created an uproar. And so these kind of assessments that are assessing a student's what they think, what they believe, their values, what they think about political subjects. And the questions are asked in a way, if you read the article from the union leader, you can see the political, almost indoctrination going on with the way the question is phrased. So that's the difference between an assessment, and that's why I say, if you bring in a test, if you actually use a test of knowledge, you can have confidence that you're looking for academic knowledge in a student. And I think that gives parents a good idea of proficiency, because one of the reasons that we've had criticisms regarding these standards is that parents assume that if they reach proficiency, that their student is proficient in math. Well, they might be proficient in having the correct political views. That doesn't necessarily mean they're proficient in math. So that's, yeah.
Good, ma'am?
Yes, I have two questions. One, maybe if Ann could speak on the testing that's being changed for GEDs, SATs, those kinds of things.
Right, yeah, so Common Core has pretty much hit everything. The GED was recently changed in New Hampshire. It is Common Core aligned. The SATs and the ACTs are Common Core aligned. So this presents a real problem, because I hear from homeschool students, homeschool parents going, if I don't teach math the way in that example, how are my kids going to do on the SAT and the ACT when they get there? Well, number one, there's like 800 colleges that don't even require the SATs anymore. Talked to a priest at St. Anselm's College, and he said, this is why we don't look at SATs anymore, because they're, are they really testing academic knowledge? So you have the concerns among private schools and homeschool parents that now their kids are going to have to take tests that are Common Core aligned, and so now you're starting to see what that means, because for some people they think Common Core aligned means, oh, it's just more rigorous and they're going to have to know more math. No, that's not necessarily the case. Again, the rigor part of it, and what I hope I made clear, is that it could mean a confusing math question. For instance, we're seeing a lot of questions about, okay, 2 + 2 = what? 4. Now explain why. Little kids can't explain why 2 + 2 = 4. Most people can't explain why. You have to have the communication skills. So now you're running into Manchester having problems with the kids who don't speak English. If you have any kind of students here who have language difficulties, they may know math, but they may not be able to pass these assessments because they can't communicate why. If I'm doing polynomial long division, how do I explain why that works? I couldn't tell you. I know how to do it, but I can explain why. So that's part of the problem with having all of these assessments now Common Core aligned. I think what the homeschoolers are, from when I talk to them, they're just going to continue to teach math, because they know that ultimately that's what's going to help their kids succeed in life. They'll still, the kids that know real math are going to be the ones getting into the selective universities. The ones that lose it because they're so focused on trick questions and confusing math that never get it, solid in their brain. That's the ones that we're concerned about.
Well, good.
The other question I have, or comment, is dealing with this data mining. They talk about the 400 points. You need to understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's not like you're going to give a child or a family, 4 pages of 100 questions, and this is all the data mining. What happens, it's my understanding, that say they were taking a math test and there's 100 questions. The child is on the computer, they answer one question at a time, and they have to answer that question before it goes to the next screen. Next screen could have some personal information, how many people live in your house, is there a step-parent, any number of things that's personal information. That child has to answer that screen, and they can't opt out of it or not applicable, they have to say yes or no before they go to the next question. And so, you can't tell your child, don't ask anything, don't answer anything personal. It's in those programs, it's set up. And am I correct in that? I've heard that before, and
Yes.
I want to make sure people
Yes.
understand that. It's not a page you can not fill out, not sign, the child can just pass over it. It's all intertwined And that's very disturbing.
There's a couple of aspects to that. There's the individual data points, but hopefully some of the legislation that we're going to be dealing with next year will take care of that. There's several privacy bills. There's also what they actually call data mining, is looking at the data and even how long it takes to answer a question and things like that, and trying to predict based on how long it takes to answer a question, or if you get this one right and get this one wrong. That's more getting into the data mining and analysis of the questions and so forth. And that's a whole different level that there will be some protections for, but we're just on the verge of getting into that area and that really science of data mining.
Another thing you can do as a board is there's a lot of surveys coming out. The surveys, a lot of times, last year I heard from parents where, I could see the survey before it was given to my kid. It was on risk behaviors and things like that. So, privacy or a policy that states that all parents see the surveys prior to their children taking them and signing off on them, getting their consent before their children take surveys. That would be a good policy to have. I just got an email from a parent yesterday from Manchester that they are doing this climate survey, and it's actually part of their plan to address the priority and focus schools. Because now, if your school district does not perform well on these assessments, they will be categorized as a priority and focus school if they're in the lower, I think it's 15%, and there's always going to be a lower 15% because that's how the calculation works out. So Manchester has several schools that are now considered priority and focus schools, and so they had to come up with a plan to deal with this. And when I looked at their plan, it almost looked like this was something written by the New Hampshire Department of Education. And I asked that at the board meeting. I said, could you explain, because this didn't look like a plan that I would think would come from the district. It looked almost like they were trying to meet the eligibility requirements for No Child Left Behind waiver. And so in there was this climate survey, and I thought, if your kids aren't performing well on math and English, why are you doing a climate survey on the safety of your children in the school district? How does that address the low proficiency level? That was part of their plan to improve their schools. My suggestion was get rid of everyday math, get rid of the calculators, save yourself $650,000, and use cost to bring in real math. And yet, this was part of the solution, was to send out the survey to parents. It had absolutely nothing to do with academics. So the surveys are also something that I would look at very closely, coming into your district from the Department of Education, and making sure that parents see them and that they sign off on them. Because that's what is concerning parents. Where is this information going? That was the first question the parents asked when they sent it to me. I don't know where it's going. I have no idea. It was very personal information.
Yes, ma'am.
I would just comment, we're from Rochester, and Rochester, actually, one of their elementary schools has a pilot program for Smarter Balance. And so many parents are uninformed, and even school board members, I think, are totally uninformed of what they need to know so they can have a discussion, an honest, educated discussion. And I'm really pleased to see that you had Ann Banfield come here and have a conversation, and I hope you continue that. We'll be in Rochester asking questions because we don't have children in the district, but we're very concerned. And so we are asking those questions, and we'll continue to ask that. And we've gone to other seminars to educate ourselves. Education is power, and we need that education. So, thank you.
Douglas?
One thing I haven't heard, and I've heard a lot about math and science, but I think the number one issue should be in education, should be reading. I picked up a saying that K through 3, and it's not my saying, you learn to read, then beyond 4th and beyond, you read to learn. And I think as schools, we need to emphasize on reading, because I believe in the STEM thing. And I've got kids in the system, and this has not been an easy decision for me. I've cut more articles, I've gone to more meetings. I probably have a pile of stuff that's 6 inches high in my house. And even now, I have worries listening to both sides, and I have to wonder at times if I've made the right decision. But I'd like to get the name of that author, because I'm reading Vilmer's book, and I don't know if anybody remembers the story, and it mainly deals with about strawberries. Has anybody read that one? Probably not, but it's a point where he was a guy that ran an ice cream business, and as our teachers, I am worried about the valuation that these teachers are going to have to go through, and I'm concerned if they're going to be fair or not. So when these teachers get these kids, you look at them as blueberries, and we get them in all kinds of states of conditions, deprived at home, learning disabilities, not able to speak English, and I want to treat my teachers fairly in this evaluation. I am worried about that, and I think we need to worry about our people that are on the front line, which is our teachers and our educators on the front line. Thank you very much.
Dr. Stutsky, in her analysis, talks about the focus on writing with Common Core standards, and she talks about why that is kind of a backwards approach, that in order to become a good writer, you have to be a reader. That you have to read, because from that reading, you become, that's how great writers become great writers. And in her critique, that's exactly what she says, is that there's, not that writing isn't important, but that it's almost a backwards approach, that, you have to become a good reader. You have to really focus on reading to become a great writer. I was invited by a parent to go to a local school district close to where I live. I'm not going to say the name because, you say the name and everybody thinks, oh, it's not happening in my district. But I went in and I sat down and I looked at what they were using in 4th or 5th grade for their language arts. And because now there's a shift in focus to these informational texts. And so there's a shift away from literature and fictional reading. And so as I'm looking at what they're using, there's a very small section on grammar. In order to be a good writer, you also have to know grammar. And as I'm flipping through this book, there was a lot of informational reading as opposed to more of the fictional or the great works that you would identify. So to your point, I think you're right. There has to be this emphasis. If you look at what she's written about her critiques on the standards, that's one of the things that she focuses on.
Good.
Yesterday, I ran across as you would describe, as a politically charged assignment, and I can say this explicitly because it had the 2 political parties and it had multiple choice to being the answer. This political party is known for being whatever. I've taken it upon myself to try and inform people about Common Core for almost a year now. But before I just post stuff and put stuff out there, I want to make sure it's actually Common Core, because like Ann had said, there's been a gender and politically charged stuff being pushed for years. And I don't want to just say, oh, this is Common Core, it's evil, if it's not actually Common Core, because I think it's evil. And then, so as I was backtracking to find out where it came from, this particular assignment, I ran into National Sex Education Standards K through 12 from Common Core. And I'm like, I've not even begun to be, I haven't even touched the science. I'm pretty proficient in the math and the English, and because we've accepted it. Rochester seems to be slipping it all in there, even though they've never come to a vote on anything so far. But I'm like, I can almost guarantee I'm the type of person, I don't want to sit there and read it on the computer. I want to print it off, look at it, mark it up, research different parts of it. I didn't have any ink in my printer, so it's still, PDF file right now. I have not printed it off, but I can pretty much guarantee it's not going to be age appropriate, any of it. So when she said it's in every area, it's in every area. So that's just something else to think about.
Thank you. Well, Ed?
Anne Marie, there's teachers' assessments, correct?
Teachers evaluation.
Teachers will be evaluated,
Yep.
correct? And the children will be assessed.
Correct.
Who pays for this testing? And is it any more than is already being borne by the different districts?
Glenn, have you looked into that? I thought you
The-
looked into that pretty
Right.
much in depth.
The state budget between 2013, 2014 did go up for assessments, but most of it is federal money. The federal government is paying for the Smarter Balance assessment development, but that money runs out the end of 2015, and my understanding is at that point it'll be up to the consortium members, the states, to continue with the funding of that assessment program.
Go ahead.
So does that mean that the states don't have their own funding to be able to handle the testing and evaluation?
Well, that's a good possibility, and that's the reason that Georgia dropped out of, they were doing not Smarter Balance, but another national or regional assessment program called PARC, and they dropped out because of the costs involved. It was going to go from $9 per student to over $20 per student.
Anybody else? All right, well, thank you for coming. Appreciate the information. The manifest. Well, sit on that. Huh? My check register. You stole my check register.
Oh, yeah, I put it there. On purpose.
You knew right where it was, so you must have. Maybe put that with the rest of the pile. We can make copies for everyone. Andrew, you wouldn't happen to know what James Cooper is off the top of your head, would you?
No, off the top of my head, too.
How about the bottom of you?
I can look it up. What number is it?
12614.
What's the date?
11/9. With check dates 11/20. And there's a invoice there.
12614, you said?
12614, yes. $12,620.
cheap as I
You gotta sign that one.
Can I make a motion to approve the manifest?
I'll second that.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Minutes of the last meeting.
Randy, all I had was on page 2, cafeteria being spelled wrong in the first sentence. I would make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from October 30th, 2013, as well as November 6th, 2013, as amended.
Second it.
Motion second, all in favor? Aye.
No, I think you have to abstain because you weren't there.
Yes.
I wasn't there.
All right. Correspondence. Nothing?
Mr. Chair?
New business. Press release. See it?
At the first meeting following elections in March of 2013, the Wakefield School Board Chairman, Stephen Brown, Vice Chair, Bonnie Sear, Robert Olette, Ralph Fogg, and Vivian Macedo were informed that the town of Wakefield had non-resident students attending Paul School while living in Wolfboro, New Hampshire. Wakefield policy JFAB clearly states that non-resident students will only be allowed to attend Wakefield schools with permission from the board. Wakefield policy JFA states that annually, the families attending Wakefield schools fill out a residency form and show proof of residency. Our district's residency form clearly states, signatures certifies that these statements are true. In accordance with state statute, anyone who knowingly falsifies a statement of residency is guilty of a Class A misdemeanor. The district may file civil action for the purpose of recovering the costs of the school attendance. Through investigation, the district has identified 4 students who attended Paul School at taxpayer expense for several years. While monies reaching over $95,000, the school board took action through legal counsel to verify information and determined that it is in the best interest of the taxpayers to notify the parents that they are responsible for the cost of the Wakefield taxpayers for educating their children while non-residents, and that they must work out a satisfactory payment plan with Superintendent Tercey. The Wakefield School Board has also instructed council to file suit, if necessary, for collection of past tuition due to the town. The Wakefield School Board would like to thank the taxpayers for your time, understanding, and need for discretion.
Administration Principals Report. Mr. Gregoire?
Any questions about my report?
And I'm glad the 8th grade auction went so well,
Very well.
as well as the fun run. Is that their first fundraising event for the PTA?
Yes.
That's wonderful. That's great. Good news.
Anybody else set? Discipline report. Nate?
Any questions?
The little ones? Are they just like going through separation anxiety a little bit, or realizing that they're not gonna be able to bail out and go home with mom, or what's
Well, I think with some of the K through 3 aspects, you get some of that rowdiness that they're still winding down from the summer. The expectations are getting a little harder this next month, so some of the schoolwork. And if you look, some of it really has to do with bus. More of
Okay.
the little referrals are from the busing. They're holding it together very well in the building, but then when they go home on the bus, it's a little more challenging.
All right.
Fidgeting, moving around.
Are we seeing a little bit of a spike in this?
Actually, these numbers are still down by almost 50% from last year. So I don't know if it's a spike. There's only
Well,
about
I
5
mean-
more from last month.
5 more from last month?
Yeah. 5 to 6. It's just that it was more heavily weighted in the little kids this month than last month.
Everybody all right with that? Student service report, Mary.
That's Ann.
That's
Ann.
That's Ann.
Oh, Ann, right, I'm sorry.
It's okay, any questions?
Mary's next. And then Mary. Sorry
I
about
do
that.
have one question.
Yeah.
I'm looking here that St. Elizabeth Seton is on the list. We actually pay tuition to a Catholic school?
We're not paying tuition to the school, I just, we do have a Wakefield student that goes there.
Okay, just curious.
We do have, if we have a student that requires related services, we sometimes provide that.
At the building that they're attending?
Yes.
Okay.
Everybody all set? Now it's your turn, Mary.
That's my turn. Any questions?
I got, like, when was the data retrieved for all of the teachers and what they wanted for the year for professional development and is it normal that they want, I saw that there was a big spike that they wanted the time when they had a sub. Is that because they're, not, how do I say it? Is it because they're so limited on time during the day that they need to have a sub in the room to get a significant amount of professional development?
Yes, I would say that that's probably true. That they, in order to do collaboration with other teachers, I think what we're finding is they feel it's best to do it during the day rather than ask to stay after school. So many of them have second jobs or cannot stay because of children.
Sure.
Childcare issues. So the collaboration piece is important for during the day.
Mm-hmm. And I won't put you on the spot tonight, but at some point in time, are you going to give us your opinion on Common Core? I won't put you on the spot tonight, but I would like you,
Thank you, Mrs.
to
Seer.
come to us and give us your opinion on what's going to be in the best interest of the Wakefield students, and as well as moving forward with Rochester. We want them to be aligned and prepared. And I want them to be able to go to any college they want to go to, or run any business they want to run. So, if you could just send me an email or something, I guess. Let me know, that would be great.
So, SAU 64, conditional school approval update. Dorothy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I spoke at the last meeting, I gave you the status that the Paul School is considered conditionally approved under the school approval process. There were 2 areas that we had to address. One of those was career education programming. The other was in our inspection report. Speaking with Principal Gregoire, he's resubmitted the survey around career education and stated how it's integrated specifically in some of our other content areas. And at this point, we're waiting on the inspection report to come back through on the 2 areas that we were noted as we had to fix a couple areas in the facility. And once we receive that report, we'll submit that on the online input system, and at that point, I would anticipate that we would be switched over to approval. So I want you to know that it's in the works from the last time that we had spoken to this, and it's being addressed.
Thank you. Residency update.
This is regarding, again, retrieving the residency forms for our students that attend Spalding. I'm still working on 7 students at this time.
I would like to update the board also. At the last meeting, the question was asked of me, and I reported 15. Unfortunately, I was not given the right information. 15 was a group of students, a range in younger grades. We actually had about 100. But since, we've cut that down to about 60 since our last meeting. So we still have a lot, but we're working at it. And I apologize that I wrote this information as I prepared for you last week, or at the last meeting.
Go ahead.
His hand was up
Oh.
first.
Go ahead, Ron.
How simple is it to prove residency? Just a electric bill, phone bill, something, a mailbox?
A bill that demonstrates they have residency at that apartment, at the house or apartment. A license wouldn't be proper only because that can change. You can maintain that same license for several years after you move. But more of a cable bill, a water bill, a tax bill, something of that nature.
Not last year's, but
No,
current.
current. Yeah, we want current.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I guess my biggest concern is that with the issues that we had last year, I would really like just to make sure that we're up to date and that if you could put some urgency on that, I would think that after 3 months of being in school that these forms should be submitted at this point in time.
And I know more phone calls have been made, letters have been sent, and right now we're trying to get them back.
Okay.
Should we run that through the policy committee? Residency?
Why don't we put that on the agenda for the next policy committee?
I think that would be a good idea. Old business, school district report sheet.
I didn't know that we were supposed to put these in the packet. I saw that there was one in there. Was I supposed to mail mine back to you? Or I thought it got tabled until this time?
Correct. We had tabled it last, and you requested for me to come back with what you actually had in your school district report last year. So,
this is it?
So in your packet on page 12, you'll see that those are all the items that you had in your school district report last year to help the board decide as to whether this is what you'd like to put in the report for this year.
How difficult would it be to add the calendar?
If we could put anything in here you like, Mr. Fogg, on this list.
I think more information makes it more transparent, and I don't think that anything should not be put in. It's, but I don't, is there a student services report? Or is that too confidential to put in?
It's very similar to what the report would be that Ms. Kevler puts in our current board packet. It's just more of a district-wide approach, it's a little, probably more holistic type of approach.
I think it would show transparency if we had a little input from everybody. Yep.
So you're thinking that each one of those categories should be checked?
Why not? No, I'm just saying, I'm saying why not? I mean, and if someone has a question, it's gonna be there. I mean, unless there's confidentiality, which I don't know about. But I think the calendar is important. Because if you have kids that go to school in Rochester, you don't necessarily know the days that the Paul School has off, or half days, or whatever. You don't necessarily know unless it's in there. And the financial officer, I would think that we'd want a brief letter from Andrew in there, saying how good your
Accounting skills.
Your accounting skills were last year in your audit. I would think that that's important.
But we don't really, we up here at this board don't need to know, Andrew. We've got proof positive. Just
we have a copy of the audit, so we know.
So would you like to check off all of these areas? And that's what I could bring back?
I believe so.
Are we gonna do a coloring contest again, or a design contest again for the cover?
Waiting on that from the art teacher.
Okay.
Our designer.
Okay. I don't think it needs to be in color. Black and white is fine for the cover.
All set?
Do we need
Yes,
to
sir.
make a motion for that? Oh, I was,
School board business,
what do we do?
Andrew said that you change the color every year.
Aren't the Panthers colors black and white anyway?
Black and white.
You can change, we can change the color of the binding.
yeah.
We could recycle it from the budget book.
School board business, policy BGB, policy adoption, and policy BHE, school board use of email.
I'll make a motion to adopt policy BGB as amended.
I'll second that.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody want to make a motion on BHE?
Oh, yeah, I'll make a motion to approve BHE as amended.
There a second? Motion second, all in favor? Aye.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I request that we can dismiss administration for coming into the next part, the next item on the agenda. I can send them home, get some rest, except for Andrew.
Yeah, he doesn't, he said, you're exceptional, Andrew.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's not my call, Mr. Olet.
Not quite yet.
If you could just email me a time.
It has been. Really?
What?
Thing.
All right, confirmation of warrant articles for the budget committee.
You'll see in your packet that we have the 2 years of warrant articles, just so you can, just for discussion tonight, to look at possibly establishing our warrant articles for this coming fiscal year 15.
Are the dates accurate? February 2013 and March? This is just from last
year.
Correct.
So it's-
Last 2 years.
These are your last 2 years of warrant articles.
I guess I would like to know as a board member, because I've read all the past warrant articles, and I guess I want to know what we have going forward that is going to warrant a warrant article. Like, I don't know if we've,
Well, you know, I think we might want to sit down and have a meeting just on warrant articles.
well, I'm wondering if we should have an informational,
Like a workshop?
a
Work session.
non-meeting work session to go over this, to make sure that we're all on the same page and that we're doing what's best for the town.
Okay.
Yes.
Up to the board.
I think think we need a,
We could maybe look at December 2nd instead, in lieu of or maybe to replace December 4th. Our next board meeting is December 4th. We could have a work session on December 2nd instead of the full board on the 4th.
It's a Monday.
so what do you suggest, to have a work session on the 2nd instead of the regular meeting on the 4th?
Correct.
I might have a conflict on that date. That's the first Monday of the month.
Yeah.
I might have a conflict.
Oh, would it be possible Tuesday?
Andrew and I are in Milton the rest of the week, budget.
Rest of that week?
We have a meeting on the 3rd in Milton. I have a community event on the 5th.
Now, would you be here Wednesday on the 4th for facilities? At 4 o'clock?
Yes.
And we have some,
You have business for facilities. I'm not saying that I'm just asking about the date. I'm not saying, but maybe we should try to see what we can do to condense that meeting down and then meet after that meeting.
on the 4th?
On the 4th. Like, have your facilities at 4, but see what we can do to cut down the meeting, and then we can have a workshop directly afterwards.
Prior to our regular scheduled meeting.
After.
Prior to.
Correct.
Prior to the regular school board.
Well, Mr. Tercey said instead of.
Right, I understand that.
Do we have anything that's gonna have to be on the agenda where, I
Well,
mean, it's...
maybe like the manifest,
Yep.
Well, I was
something
just
like
gonna, I was thinking maybe just make it an agenda item to discuss some of these things at our regular board meeting on the 4th.
I think I want
No.
more information given,
Yeah.
and I really want to look through the budget to make sure I know, and I want to know what the facilities plan is. I want to be able to have time and sit, and I want to look over what Harriman's coming forth with, and I want to look over what we asked for last year, what did we complete last year, what didn't we complete from last year, and where are we going forward?
I think it's gonna involve more time than you're gonna be able to fit into a regular board meeting.
So do we want to have a short board meeting at 5 o'clock and then go into a work session? Because we're going to have to approve manifests for checks.
Well,
Yeah,
And if anything of great importance comes up, we could do that.
that'll be fine. We could have it as could do the manifest, and the only other agenda item would be
A work session.
warrant articles.
Okay,
I won't have any items for the 4th.
okay.
Next week is Thanksgiving week, so, and it's only a few days in the week that we'll be in the office.
Do you motion to do that?
No, I can just develop the agenda.
Okay.
So Wednesday, is that what we said?
Yep, Wednesday we'll have a
Wednesday.
regular meeting, but it'll be a work session, right?
Well, we'll just,
Yes.
at the end of our regular meeting, we'll say, we'll go into a workshop, I guess.
Okay.
So do I need to stay for the work session?
No.
Okay.
Unless you really want to make the big bucks.
Yeah. That's great, thank you.
Committee reports, facility subcommittee minutes.
This, Mr. Chair, is to request to have any of the subcommittee meeting minutes included in the full board packets. So
Thank
that's
you.
where this is coming. You'll see that from now on.
I appreciate that.
All right, thank you.
Do we need to approve those?
No,
We already did.
already approved.
I amended
Those
them.
subcommittee?
Right.
All the minutes that you will receive at the full board have already been approved at the subcommittee level.
I see, okay.
Comments for the public. So,
I wanted to address BGB. You didn't have a public comment at the beginning. I raised my hand, but I wasn't recognized. Looks like this says that the subcommittee will be the first reading and then the board will be the second reading, am I correct?
Yes, ma'am.
How can you have a first reading that doesn't have the entire board? Two people wouldn't have that power. It seems to me the only way you could have two readings is to have two readings with the entire board.
Would you like me to comment to that, Mr. Chair?
Would you?
Yes.
Amen.
The intent of the subcommittee is to vet any of the policies and decide as a subcommittee as to whether they want to bring that policy forward, and they make that recommendation or approval to bring that policy to the full board. And that policy will come to the full board, and the full board will have the information prior in order to make a decision at that meeting, and they can approve it at the full board. So again, the intent of a subcommittee is to vet out any policies or similar to facilities, to vet any issues around facilities, and bring their recommendations to the full board for discussion for approval.
And I understand that, but you're still only having one reading of the full board.
Would you like me to comment to that, Mr. Chair?
Please.
And if the full board still has concerns or questions, it can be sent back to the subcommittee for further vetting and then brought back to the full board for approval.
Okay, number one says announcement and publication of proposed new or revised policy. How do you intend on announcing or publicizing this when it goes from the subcommittee to the school board meeting without ever being televised by for the public? Or even on your website? It looks like you're taking away the opportunity for the public to comment on policies.
I know that all of our policy subcommittee meetings are open to the public. The agendas are posted. When the policy subcommittee puts policies forward to the full board, it's included in the packets. It's also part of the agenda, and our full board meetings, the public can attend and make comments there as well.
Well, how many people do you have attending a 4 o'clock meeting when they don't even know that this is part of the discussion, because it's normally not even an agenda item or an agenda on your website?
Don't have any comments.
The way I read that, it looks like it's going to be announced or publicized of the proposed and new revised policies as an item of information.
And I'm asking how you plan on doing that.
Could possibly be on the agenda when the meeting's posted. If you know that you're gonna discuss certain policies, you could add it to the posting.
Is there a possibility to put that on the website?
Yes?
Yeah.
Yeah, we post our agendas on the website.
All right, thank you. Your comment? Anybody else? So,
Okay, at the budget committee meeting, Steve, you mentioned that you had gone over some policies at the last school board meeting that you didn't have ready. I don't mean policies, I mean warrant articles. You didn't have any ready, but you had discussed some?
Yeah.
Okay, when did that happen? Because I was here for the meeting, you went into non-public, you came out of non-public, and ended the meeting. Did you discuss these warrant articles, the 3 you were talking about, during non-public?
no.
When did you discuss them?
Yep,
Facilities.
facilities, that's right.
And we didn't discuss the facilities.
Yeah, it was during the facilities subcommittee meeting. And that's when I said that I would like to see all of them instead of, and as in that case, 3 at a time.
So there will be minutes for that meeting at some point?
Yep,
Okay, because You're way behind on your website with meeting minutes for your subcommittees.
All right, thank you. Anything else? Whoop, Connie?
I used to get the minutes, Kathy Vigor used to send them to me, but I don't get them anymore, so do I have to sign up again to get them?
I know that you can go to the website directly and print them off. Would you like them sent to you personally?
Yes, I would. I did before. It's much easier for me to do it that way, to get the minutes.
I used to get them also, but I don't get them anymore either.
Must be because of the website. I don't usually go to the website for something. I do it
Check
otherwise
off if you want.
through my email.
Mail
We
them
usually
out.
just send everybody to the website and they print them off themselves.
I think because of the website, we made it so that everyone can get them in one particular way.
Okay. Okay.
We do have some people that come and pick up
Yep,
a packet or
you may
minutes or
come and pick up
something.
a packet if you'd like, an informational packet.
Okay.
I'll send them to you, Connie.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I have a motion to go into non-public under RSA 91, A32, B and C, tuition requests and nominations.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second? Motion second, all in favor?
Joy, I.
Fall guy.
Brown, yes. Thank you for coming.
You did.
You're doing a good job, Jane.
Thank you. I'm trying. It's all new, but I'm learning as I go.
We all